Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back to the show, Indestructible Souls. I am Jonathan Beauregard coming live. It's been a while. Once again, I want to thank you for your continued support for the podcast Indestructible Souls and the continued support for the private practice Beauregard Therapy. And yet again, I am live, and what is today? Today is October 9th. Happy birthday to Darius. Happy 32. Happy 32nd birthday to Darius, my daughter's brother. So here we are. It's been a lot going on. It's been a lot going on in the news. It's been a lot going on social media. I'm not here to talk to you about that stuff today, but, yeah, when we talk about the artists that we appreciate and love, when we talk about the different things that's going on, most recently we had Kanye West, on social media. I just saw earlier today where he got restricted from Instagram and Twitter for anti-Semitic remarks, but there was no, that's interesting enough that he was suspended for that. But then, he's on the social media with the White Lives Matter T-shirt, and some people may say, well, what's wrong with that? Well, there's a lot wrong with it, not because everybody doesn't matter, not because white lives don't matter, but the real issue is that it's a direct attack on Black Lives Matter, and you talk about the level of coonery at its highest, man. And the reality that it is that when we talk about the difference between Black Lives Matter and so forth, when we talk about the white supremacy in this country and the systematic racism, the reality of it is that when we say Black Lives Matter, regardless of how you feel about the organization versus how do you feel about the statement, those are two different things. And so when you talk about systematic racism, when you talk about white supremacy and oppression, that is the antithesis of when you talk about Black Lives Matter. And I don't think he understands, and probably very little people understand the magnitude of what he's doing, even though on the surface it may seem harmless. But I digress. That's not why I'm here to talk to you today. So it's been a while. I'm happy to be back. I'm feeling okay, but I've been having some issues with my eye today, itchy eye. So if my eyes look red, I ain't smoking. Just dry eyes, put some artificial tears in there, feel better and all that good stuff. But before a lot of times when I come into this space, when there's so much negativity in the air, one of the things I like to do is clear my space. And, so I'm gonna burn some sage real quick while we talk. And I got a decent topic for you today. And yet again, I'm glad that you guys continue to join, to continue to support not only me, but support this movement. There's more and more spaces out there for Black males to get in touch with their mental health and so forth. So I just want to continue to provide a space where for us as Black men, we have a space that we can, learn from each other, learn new things. And those who love Black men and young Black men can come here and get some knowledge on how to deal with various situations. So a lot of my topics are inspired by the things that I see on the day-to-day. And so today, one of the things I want to talk about, or the particular thing I want to talk about, and is do we talk to our children? Do we talk to our kids? What do I mean by that? So that may seem like a very simple topic or a very simple question, but today I hope I'm gonna put a new spin on it so you understand exactly what I mean by do we talk to our children? And so here's why this is so important. We live in a day and age where we're so advanced when it comes to technology, social media, particularly the internet, YouTube, and so forth. Our children are way far advanced than we are when it comes to consuming information. And oftentimes they're consuming information without context, without emotional maturity, without true understanding, and so forth. So they're constantly consuming this information. But a lot of times, what I learn and what I see, and even reflecting as as a younger person, is that do we sit and have conversations and talk to our children? What do I mean by talk to our children? Have open dialogue so we have a mutual understanding of each other, have an open dialogue so we have a mutual conversation. And I'm going to say this throughout, is to have a mutual conversation without rank. What do I mean by that? Well, when I say without rank, we have mother, we have father, we have these roles that are already implied. But do I sit and have a conversation so I can understand what my child is going through? So we can have an open dialogue through communication. So I can hear their opinions, whether I disagree or agree or not. So I can use different moments without something being wrong. I can use different moments for teaching and learning experiences. Do we sit down and have conversations and talk to our children? I'm going to go over a few topics that I think are pertinent that we should have open dialogue about, or open dialogue when it comes to our kids. But one of the things that I see often, and I don't know why, I don't know if there's something in the air, but I know as people come to me, I see more and more boys, more and more adolescent teenagers come to therapy and their parents bring them. And what happens is I have these conversations, right? Talk to the parent, talk to the kid. And then a lot of times I'll ask a simple question. Did anyone talk to you about that? Did you talk to your child about that? Do y'all sit down and talk? Do you have conversations? Oftentimes, kids are tucked away in their room, whether it's on social media, video games, or with their friends, which whatever it may be. Parents are off doing their thing, and sometimes necessarily, especially when you got to go to work. But the only time there's a dialogue is when there's something wrong, or when the kid has done something wrong. Very seldom do I hear about parents or about families sitting down and having open conversations about the things that our kids are going to face in life. Having an open dialogue, yet again, without rank. It is extremely important when we start talking about having conversations with your kid, is that your position as a parent is already implied. But it's also important for you to come out of self, mom and dad, and have a conversation without your opinion, without you imposing what you want to see, and making it a safe space for your child to have a conversation and talk about the things that are important to them. Especially when we live in a world where there is so much information and so much misinformation. The problem is our children don't have the context and the mental maturity, the emotional maturity to digest all of these things. So what happens is they're figuring it out on their own. Or they get this information, or they process this with kids their age, or process it with another adult that doesn't have the objectivity to give them correct information. So when we talk about, when I ask, are you talking to your kids? I'm not talking about, are you talking at your kids. I'm talking about, are you talking with your children? Regardless of if you agree with their assessment of life or not, how are you as a parent supposed to guide if we're not having a conversation? Here's an example, and I'm going to give, when we talk about sex, I'm going to give a list of things I think are important that we should talk to our kids about, but that list can go on and on and on, because we should be talking to our kids about whatever they come up with. So here's an example. A young boy is exploring his sexuality, right? And nothing, I'll say it this way. He's underage. There's some potential deviant behavior where exposing himself, sending messages to girls that are underage, and all of these things that we as adults get scared of. Like, oh no, is this kid going to be a pedophile? Is he going to be whatever? I asked the question of, have you guys ever sat and had a talk about sex, even after all of these things has happened? Has your dad talked to you about it? No. Mom, have you talked to him about it? No. Dad, have you had a conversation about sexuality, sex, and boundaries and so forth? No. Then the question becomes, how is this kid supposed to learn? The problem is, a lot of, particularly boys, but I'm assuming girls too, a lot of times they're learning about sexuality and sex and sex acts and what's expected through social media and the internet. But sometimes parents, because we just have an expectation that kids will listen and do as we say, that we fail to have an open back and forth dialogue with our children. So today I'm asking, do you talk to your children? Here's a couple examples, right? Or some things that I think we should regularly have conversations about, especially as our kids get older. Here's the thing. We live in an age where a lot of information they already have. But are we as parents putting it into context and giving them a moral scale to be able to deal with these things? So one, which I know is probably one of the most difficult, is, are we having conversations about sex and sexuality? I know a lot of times parents are fearful to have this conversation because somehow they believe having this conversation is given a green light to have sex or so forth. Or when someone is dealing with their sexuality, these are things we oftentimes don't want to talk about. But imagine when we take this topic, when it comes to sex and sexuality, take that element of it being taboo out of it and making it safe to have a conversation, because guess what? All of us go through natural development where sex at some point and sexuality at some point is going to be part of our development. But are we having the conversation about it? And here's the thing. I'll say it this way. I was going to say take religion out of it. Now, here's what I mean by that. Let me clarify that before I even say it. There's nothing wrong with you teaching what your faith and what your religion says about sex and sexuality, right? Now, in a day and age where sexuality is way more on a spectrum than what we were taught, then we have this religious aspect when it comes to sexuality. There's nothing wrong with you teaching what your faith and what your religion believes about sex and sexuality. However, here's my belief. As a parent, after we teach those things, as a parent, I have to take myself and that out of it so I can have a human conversation with my child about sex and sexuality. Having conversations about their bodies, what their bodies are going to go through, what their minds are going to go through, how it affects their mental health, letting them talk about the things that they've seen, let them talk about the things that they've heard and the things that they're experiencing, so we can have an open dialogue, yet again, without rank, so we can have an open and honest discussion. Here's why without rank is so important. Because it frees up the conversation. It frees up that my child know that we can have a conversation regardless of how it may make me feel or what my opinion is, but they feel safe enough to have the conversation. So we have to have talks, conversation, back and forth communication, regardless of what we believe about sex and sexuality. Here's another one that's super important, especially in this day and age, is about substance abuse. Well, Johnny, why should we talk about substance abuse? Particularly in the day and age where marijuana is now mainstream. Now, I don't have an opinion about, well, I do have an opinion. However, what I see is because social media, internet, society, marijuana is now more acceptable, legalized, and so forth. I see more and more kids, particularly boys, think it's okay to just go ahead and indulge at a very early age. But here's the thing. We have to have conversations about it and talk about it long before it's even happening and let kids know our beliefs, our stance on it, and letting them understand or having a discussion without rank of what are the risks and the potential risk of indulging in any type of substance abuse. And so when we talk about substance use, are we having a conversation? Can a kid come to their father or to their mother and say, hey, they keep offering me marijuana and it looks fun and I'm thinking about doing it. I recently came across a kid who not only indulged in it in high school, but then offered it to his little brother. Why? Because nobody's having conversations about it. Are we able to have a dialogue about the things that's making us uncomfortable, with the understanding that kids are still going to make their choices? However, I personally believe if we're having conversations with our children and talking about those things that are uncomfortable, even if they make those choices, it's easier to deal with because we've already had these conversations. Here's a couple other things that I think is very important. I should have clumped these two together, but I didn't. But particularly personal history and family history. Should we have conversations about not only our family history, but also our personal history? Here's why those things are extremely important, right? Particularly when we talk about our personal histories, I know for myself and my family, there's things that are omitted. But the problem is our children can find not only power and get a better understanding of us as parents, they get a better understanding of themselves when we share our personal histories. The good, bad, the indifferent. Now, am I saying being reckless with your personal history, but not using your personal history as a weapon to just prove a point, but talking about, answering questions, and giving information about some of the things that we've had to go through, some of the things we've had to overcome, some of our achievements, and just what we've had to, just who we are, what we think about things, how we feel about things. But sharing our personal history, but more particularly, sharing our mistakes. If we share our mistakes, not yet again as a weapon, but how we overcame it and even how we got into that trouble long before our kids are in trouble, they get a better understanding and they can hear it without resistance. Say that again. When we share particular information, not as a weapon, and after things have gone bad, they can hear it without resistance. Because oftentimes we well, I did this, and when I was this and I did that, at that point they're not hearing. So, but here, family history. There's a wealth of knowledge in family history that we should be sharing with our kids. And so recently I've been spending a lot of time on ancestry.com and been able to trace my family history way beyond I could imagine. But I was able to verify a lot of that stuff based off of the stories that my grandmother told us about the family name, how our family name changed from when we moved from Mississippi to the north and so forth. And so, and who were the relatives? And she talked about we come from a family of strong women, but we also come from a family of alcoholics and things like that. Those are things we need to share because people get a better understanding of who we are as children if our parents are sharing their personal history along with a family history. It's extremely important. Here's another thing that we should be constantly talking about is financial wellness. Do we talk to our kids about money? Not just, sometimes finances are a struggle, and I get it, but are we having conversations about not only generational wealth, investing, giving them a true concept of what money is, or are we simply teaching them through demonstration on how to waste money and how to spend money and understanding the value of money, understanding the value of hard work, yet again, without rank. One of the things as parents, and I keep using this term without rank, is that we have to take ourselves and put ourselves in a position to listen and learn, understand what our kids are going through so they get a better understanding of us and they get a better understanding of themselves, and they feel like we are a safe haven to have these conversations and to talk to. Oftentimes, parents are the last ones to figure out why, because we have not made it a part of our culture to just sit down and have conversation. Are we still sitting at the dinner table and having conversations? Are we just sitting around the living room and just chopping it up? Are we creating space to just talk? But I'm going to use this term yet again, without rank. Because guess what? Sometimes our kids share opinions and beliefs that we don't share or we agree with. But I know oftentimes a lot of kids will just sit silent and live within that distress because they don't feel safe talking to their parents. Are we talking about mental health? Are we talking about sexuality? Are we talking about all of those things that make the world turn around? Are we just having fun conversations? Everything doesn't need to be serious, but I tell you like this, if I sit down and we could just talk about current events, we could just sit down and laugh and have conversations when things get tough, it makes it that much easier to come back and just sit and have conversation and talk about those things that matter. Here's what I'm asking parents to do is take off knowing when to take off your parent hat with the implied authority that you already have to be able to listen to your child or your children wholeheartedly without judgment, without persecution, without imposing your opinion, without imposing your ideas, to hear them out. And I know I've said this before, particularly adolescents, teenagers, in my experience, they simply like coming to therapy simply because we listen. not because they appreciate us more than their parents, but because they could sit here and share their opinions without judgment. They could say what they really think without somebody telling them they shouldn't think that way. They shouldn't feel that way because of, I did this for you, I did that for you, so why do you feel that way? But if we open up the dialogue and at a very early age, not make certain subjects taboo and have these open and honest conversations, our children will do better. Our children will have a better understanding of the world around them. Our children will make better choices. It will strengthen our relationships, especially in the time of trouble. Kids hold secrets and hold things in because we haven't created a safe avenue for communication. So I'm going to leave it right there. So when we talk about opening up the lines of communication, are you talking to your children without rank, without judgment, without being opinionated, and all of those things? So yet again, my name is Jonathan Beauregard. This has been Indestructible Souls. You could find me on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. You could also find me at Beauregard Therapy at Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and all that good stuff. So yet again, my name is Jonathan Beauregard. This has been Indestructible Souls. Thank you. Excuse me for the technical difficulties, and I'm out.
Yeah.